far as JD taking a cart, well, I walked with a broken leg, so.
It sucks. And you know what? And I can say for these guys, like Tiger and these guys, when they get to 50, oh, watch what happens.
He was jealous. Not Daly's words about one man, his words about 6 of them. 6 golfers who stood at the very top of this sport and could not stand what John Daly was. In 2019, a golf cart at Bethpage Black put it all on display again. They attacked him for needing a cart. Not for cheating, not for breaking any rule, just for still being there. That moment did not come from nowhere. It was the latest eruption in a 30-year story of one man refusing to fit the mold of professional golf, and a whole sport refusing to stop resenting him for it. And the anger was never really about the cart. It was never about the cigarettes or the Diet Coke or the way he dressed. The anger was about something far more threatening to these men. John Daly could walk into any room, any tournament, any stage in this sport, and without doing a single thing they approved of, leave with all the attention. He showed up to the 1991 PGA Championship as a 9th alternate, the last man in the field. He had not earned a spot through rankings or form. He was just next on the list, and he walked away with the trophy. No meticulous preparation, no polished image, no deference to the senior players who believed they owned that locker room. Just a massive swing, a working-class personality, and a connection with regular people that the establishment could not manufacture no matter how hard it tried. The fans went electric. The establishment went cold. This video covers 6 names. 6 golfers who showed at different moments in different ways what John Daly's continued success and continued relevance cost them emotionally. None of them were jealous of his lifestyle. None of them wanted his chaos or his struggles. What they resented was his freedom. The fact that he could skip every rule in the unwritten handbook, every expectation of how a professional golfer should look and behave and carry himself, and still be the most talked about man on the course. If you are in Daly's corner on this one, hit the hype feature on this video right now. Back the outsider. It takes 1 second. 6 names. 6 different flavors of that same resentment. We count down from 6, and the strongest case is saved for the end. Number 6 on this list is Greg Norman, and this one carries a specific kind of sting, because Norman was supposed to be the one person in professional golf who truly understood Daly. Norman built his entire image as the Shark, golf's great rebel. He challenged the PGA Tour's power structure. He pushed for a breakaway world tour back in the 90s. He positioned himself as the man willing to stand against the establishment and fight for something new. If anyone in the sport was going to open a door for John Daly, it was supposed to be the man who spent decades fighting the same walls Daly never even bothered to knock on. So when Daly begged Norman for a spot on the LIV Golf Series, the Saudi-backed league Norman was leading, most people thought there was a natural fit. LIV was selling itself as the disruption, the revolution, the tour that was going to change everything. Daly was the original disruption in golf. He was the man who made this sport feel alive to people who had never watched a tournament. The working-class hero. The wild thing. The guy smoking and laughing and bombing at 300 yards while the stuffy traditional crowd shook their heads. Norman said no. Too old. That was it. Too old. That. 2 words from the so-called rebel, and Daly was out. LIV wanted younger names, bigger commercial draws. Daly's brand of chaos did not fit the corporate packaging of a league trying to compete on the global stage. The irony is sharp. Norman challenged the PGA Tour for decades and built himself into a brand with private jets and a business empire behind him. But he never actually connected with everyday golf fans the way Daly did. The real ones. The ones who brought coolers to tournaments and wore loud shirts and stayed until the last putt dropped because Daly was still in it. That was Daly's world. Norman always watched it from outside, and when the moment came to give Daly a final platform, Norman closed the door with the same gatekeeping language the establishment had always used. Just newer packaging. The rebel had become the gatekeeper, and Daly was standing on the wrong side of that door. Years before that door was shut, another name on this list had already decided Daly would not survive long enough to need one. Number 5 is Fuzzy Zoeller, and this story is darker than most people realize. Zoeller was a 2-time major winner, outspoken, and known for a personality that could cut deep. He and Daly were not strangers. During one Masters week, the two played 9 holes together, went to lunch at a restaurant called T-Bonds, and kept drinking until the following morning. They played the par 3 tournament the next day, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. That is the relationship they had. And somewhere inside it, Zoeller made a wager. He told Daly he was betting $150,000 that Daly would not live to see his 50th birthday. Not as a throwaway joke, as a real bet made during that multi-day drinking stretch at the Masters. The message was blunt. Inside his own profession, Daly was not seen as someone who would make it. He was seen as a tragedy in progress. A man whose lifestyle was racing against his survival. The cruelty in this is not just what Zoeller said, it is what it reveals. Daly was not treated as a peer by his colleagues. He was treated as a spectacle, something to watch with a drink in your hand and a knowing headshake, not a man to respect and compete alongside, something closer to a walking wager. Daly turned 50 in 2016. He made it. He went to social media and called Zoeller out, telling him he owed $150,000. Daly even admitted neither of them had formally shook on it, so he would not hold Zoeller to the payment. But the point was made. At Daly's Champions Tour debut, Zoeller showed up and settled with a bottle of his own branded vodka. The wager on a man's life paid off in spirits. It became part of Daly's legend, one more chapter in the story of a man who outlasted every prediction. But underneath the folklore is the real fact. A professional colleague bet against Daly surviving to 50. That is not banter. That is the establishment reducing a man to a punchline, dismissing his resilience before he had even proven it. They were wrong. Daly is still here. He always was. The name that follows on this list took a quieter approach. No bet on Daly's life, just a verdict on the worth of his career. Number 4 is Nick Price. And Price's version of resentment comes wrapped in concern, which somehow makes it land harder. Price reached world number 1 in 1994. He was the model professional, disciplined, methodical, relentless in his preparation, and spotlessly behaved throughout his career. To Price, greatness in golf was earned through sacrifice and consistency. You worked, you showed up, you treated the game with gravity. After Daly's suspension from the tour in 1993, Price offered his assessment. He said Daly had the world at his fingertips, and that early success had spoiled him. Spoiled. That was the word. Not struggling, not dealing with problems bigger than anyone knew. Spoiled. The research points to what was really underneath that. Price was not jealous of Daly's lifestyle. Nobody was standing in line for that. What ate at Price was the ease. Daly had a physical gift in that era that was almost impossible to replicate. He could reach par 5s in 2 shots in ways the field simply could not match. He had natural power that no amount of disciplined practice could manufacture. And to a player who had ground out every single ranking point through pure commitment and sacrifice, watching someone with that kind of natural gift throw it away through suspension and chaos felt like a personal insult to everyone who had worked the right way. This was the resentment of the natural over the worker. Daly was chaotic and suspended, and still the most entertaining player on tour. Still the conversation. Still the one the fans came to see. Price's spoiled label became the template the establishment would use for years. And it set up the next chapter perfectly, because when 2019 arrived and the cart story broke, the old narrative came roaring back to life. Before the cart drama, one name in particular had the measuring stick polished and ready. Number 3 is Tiger Woods. And this one is complicated because the public moment was brutal and the private ending was something entirely different. It is 2019. Bethpage Black. Tiger is asked about Daly riding a cart, and he says he walked on a broken leg. That was the reference. The 2008 United States Open, which Tiger won while playing on a torn ACL and a fractured tibia. A legendary performance. A moment that became part of his story forever. And he used that achievement, that specific suffering, as the standard against which he measured Daly's choice to use a medical cart. Tiger's world operates on a code. Greatness equals the capacity to endure, to push through, to refuse the accommodation. By invoking the broken leg, he was not making a light comment. He was placing Daly's situation against his own and letting the audience reach their own conclusion. The research makes clear that the comment came without the full picture. Daly was managing severe osteoarthritis, diabetes, and a collapsed lung. The media had not fully reported the extent of what he was dealing with. Tiger's remark landed in that gap, and then the story changed privately. Daly said Tiger apologized. They met at a dinner where Daly had shown up dressed as Santa Claus. Tiger said sorry, and Daly accepted it. When Tiger was in a serious car crash in 2021, Daly was one of the first people to reach out to him. But the public remark still stands as a document of that moment. The greatest player in the sport joined the pylon. He picked up the measuring stick and swung it at Daly in front of the entire golf world. Daly took the hit and kept going. Even the very top of the establishment could not resist weighing in. The man at number 2 drew the same line, but from a place of even deeper personal bitterness. Number 2 is Nick Faldo. 6 major titles. A career defined by obsessive discipline and a willingness to strip everything away in pursuit of the perfect swing. Faldo rebuilt his technique twice from scratch, both times at enormous personal cost. He gave up relationships, gave up social ease, gave up parts of himself, because he believed the game demanded total sacrifice. Daly gave up nothing the game told him to, 2 of them, on his own terms, and he still won majors. In 2019 at Bethpage Black, Faldo was broadcasting. His playing days were long finished. But when the cart story came out, he had plenty to say. He argued that walking is an integral part of professional golf, that the cart was not a medical accommodation. It was a privilege, an unfair energy advantage over every other player walking that grueling course. The PGA of America had already conducted a medical review. They confirmed Daly qualified under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The legal and medical case had been made and accepted. Daly called using the cart embarrassing, but said he needed it to get through the rounds. Faldo's position ignored the legal reality and chose tradition instead. But the real story is the contrast playing out in plain sight. Faldo was in the broadcast booth, his relevance tied entirely to what he had already accomplished. Daly was in a cart at Bethpage, cigarette going, Diet Coke in hand, cruising the fairways, and the well-lined New York crowd was still watching, still cheering, still completely alive to his presence on that course. That is what the research identifies as the real source of Faldo's irritation. Not the cart, not the rules. Faldo had sacrificed his personality, his comfort, his relationships, everything he had for the sport's recognition. He had submitted to every demand the game made and received respect in return. Daly had submitted to nothing. He had lived exactly as he pleased. And he was still, at a major championship, the most entertaining figure on the course. That is the kind of freedom that a man who traded everything for control cannot easily forgive. And the man who never forgave Daly from the very beginning, the original gatekeeper, is the one who sits at number one. Number one is Curtis Strange. And this is where the story starts. Strange was a two-time United States Open champion, the defining figure of the tour's disciplined guard in the late 80s and early 90s. Every aspect of his career was built on the understanding that the PGA Tour was a meritocracy with rules. You paid your dues, you respected seniority, you deferred to those who came before and proved themselves. You did not walk into the locker room as a rookie acting like the world already belonged to you. John Daly walked into the 1991 PGA Championship as a ninth alternate and won the tournament. He did not win it quietly. He hit the ball enormous distances. He wore loud clothes and carried himself like he belonged nowhere near a country club. He talked to fans like a regular person and showed no deference to the senior players who believed rookies should keep their heads down and learn their place. He turned up as himself, entirely and without apology, and the crowd loved every second of it. Daly has said it plainly. He and Strange never had a good relationship. Strange was not nice to him. Strange had no patience for rookies who came in acting like the hierarchy did not apply to them. But the research frames this as something beyond two men not getting along. Strange was a gatekeeper in the truest sense. He believed in the tour as a sacred institution. He had been at the forefront of player-only meetings in 1994 when a proposed breakaway tour threatened the structure he had spent his career defending. The tour was not just where Strange worked, it was what he stood for. And Daly was a direct challenge to every principle that institution represented. Strange jeered rookies. His contemporaries noted it as a defining characteristic of that era's locker room culture. It was the mechanism by which the hierarchy maintained itself. You reminded new players of their place until they accepted it. Daly never accepted it. He was not trying to earn the senior players' respect. He already had the fans. That is the center of everything. Daly captured the crowd without permission. He got more love from regular people simply by being himself than many polished, perfectly behaved players ever received after years of doing everything by the book. To a man whose entire professional identity was built on earning approval through the correct channels, through sacrifice and deference and following every unspoken rule, that was not just irritating, it was a fundamental threat. The system Strange believed in said this was impossible. It proved that everything he had devoted himself to defending could be bypassed entirely by someone real enough and loud enough to connect directly with the people in the stands. Daly did not ask for approval. That bothered people who had built their whole careers living and dying by it. Strange was the first to make it obvious, and every name above him on this list was just a different expression of the same wound. That is the real thread running through all 6 of these names. It was never about Daly's smoking or his drinking or his golf cart. It was about the fact that John Daly was free in a way these men were not. He did not need their approval. He did not need to be perfect. He won the 1991 PGA Championship and the Open in 1995. He competed for decades while this sport tried to push him out at every turn. He turned 50 when his own peers had bet against it. Still playing, still the outsider, still himself. The gates never held, the outsider never left, and the fans never stopped cheering. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe, and drop a comment telling us which of these 6 names surprised you the most.